All right, today we are diving into one of the biggest questions there is, a real mystery that gets to the very heart of who we are as a species.
I mean, really think about that for a second. For millions of years, Earth was home to a whole family of different human-like species, all doing their own thing. And then, poof, there was just us. So how on earth did we become the last humans standing?
You know, you look around today, and it feels completely normal, right? From the highest mountains to the most remote islands, our species, Homo sapiens, is, well, everywhere. We're a global phenomenon, 7 billion strong. But this complete takeover of the planet, it's actually a really new and kind of strange thing in the long history of life.
To really understand how unique our situation is, we need to rewind the clock. And I mean way, way back.
Because if you could go back in time, you'd see that for almost all of human history, we shared this world. The planet was a much more crowded place, full of our evolutionary cousins and ancestors.
So, let's meet the family. This is where the story gets really, really fascinating. This timeline just gives you a sense of the immense scale of our story. I mean, our journey starts when our ancestors split off from the chimpanzee line about 7 million years ago. And from there, this whole family of upright walking relatives, or hominins, just blossomed. You can see how species like Lucy, at 3.18 million years ago, were living at the same time as others. It was a busy and probably pretty competitive world.
And just look at the difference. On the left, that's the skeleton of Lucy, one of our famous early ancestors from over 3 million years ago. She was small, walked on 2 legs, but still had these long arms, probably for climbing. And then on the right, that's us. That incredible transformation is the entire story of our evolution, right there.
Our family tree had all these different branches. You had ancestors like Lucy on one path, but then other relatives took a totally different route, like the Paranthropines. They developed these massive jaws for chewing tough plants. Turns out that was an evolutionary dead end. But another branch, our own group called Homo, started eating more meat and making simple tools. And that was the path that led directly to us.
So, what happened? What was the secret sauce that gave our direct ancestors the edge? Well, it seems to come down to a few key, game-changing innovations. One of those big sparks was technology. On the left, you've got one of the very first stone tools. It's basically just a rock smashed to get a sharp edge. Simple. But on the right, that's a huge leap forward. That's a hand axe. Making one of those required planning, skill. You had to actually picture the final tool inside the stone before you started. This leap in tech shows a huge leap in how they were thinking. And all that new thinking was powered by this, the brain boom. An early Australopithecine brain was around 461 cubic centimeters. Not much bigger than a chimp's. But by the time we get to Homo ergaster, it had more than doubled. And with us, Homo sapiens, it basically tripled. This created this powerful feedback loop. Better tools meant better food, like meat, which fueled bigger brains, which could then invent even better tools. See how that works? And the final piece of the puzzle? Fire. Being able to control fire was a complete game changer. Suddenly you have warmth, protection from predators at night, a social hub to gather around. But maybe most important of all, it allowed our ancestors to cook their food, which unlocked way more nutrients to fuel those rapidly growing brains. So with bigger brains, better tools, and the power of fire, our ancestors were finally ready to take on the world. And I mean that literally. But here's the thing. We weren't the first ones to leave home. Nope. The first great migration out of Africa happened well over 1.5 million years ago, led by species like Homo erectus. They spread all the way across Asia. They proved that hominins could adapt to totally new environments, far from the African savanna. Okay, let's fast forward a bit. By the time our species, Homo sapiens, was just getting its start in Africa, another really successful human species had been dominating Europe and Western Asia for a long, long time, the Neanderthals. These guys were tough, they were smart, and they were perfectly adapted to the cold of Ice Age Europe. The stage was set for a meeting of two very different, very capable human groups. And you can really see how different they were. The Neanderthal skull on the right is long and low, with that classic heavy brow ridge. The modern human skull on the left, it's higher, more rounded, with a flatter face and, of course, a prominent chin. Just two different, but equally successful, ways of being human.
So where did we come from in all this? Well, the fossil and genetic evidence is pretty overwhelming.
As the great scientist Stephen Jay Gould put it, all humans alive today come from a single population that lived in Africa less than 200,000 years ago.
And this map, this shows that journey. The second great migration out of Africa. But this time, it was us. We spread out across the entire globe, and it seems that everywhere we went, the other human species that had been there for hundreds of thousands of years simply vanished.
Which brings us right back to our central mystery. What happened when we met our cousins? Why did we survive when they didn't? So was it some kind of blitzkrieg, a sudden, violent conquest? Well, the evidence says probably not. In Europe, for example, modern humans and Neanderthals lived alongside each other for as long as 10,000 years. That's a huge amount of time. It wasn't a quick replacement. It was a long, slow process.
So instead of a simple war, the reality was way more complex. It looks like we just outcompeted them, slowly, over thousands of years. Maybe our more complex language and symbolic culture gave us an edge, allowing for bigger social networks to help us get through the tough times. And here's the craziest part. We now know from DNA that there was interbreeding. Many of us today carry a little piece of Neanderthal and other ancient groups like the Denisovans right inside our own genes. They didn't just vanish. In a way, part of them was absorbed into our story.
After the other human species were gone, we just kept going. We built boats to cross open ocean to Australia more than 45,000 years ago. We crossed into the Americas about 15,000 years ago. And get this, the very last major landmass, New Zealand, wasn't settled by people until around 1250 AD. Our complete takeover of the planet is a surprisingly recent event.
And what did we do once we were alone? We built things like this. We created art, agriculture, cities, entire empires. We literally reshaped the planet to suit our needs. Our unique combination of intelligence, cooperation, and adaptation, all honed over millions of years of evolution, finally made us the sole human species on the globe.
So we went from being just one of several human species in Africa to the only human species on a planet that we now control. It is an absolutely incredible story of survival, which leaves us with one final, massive question. After this unbelievable journey, what comes next?